Good morning. I'm John Knotts, and welcome to the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. We're here at Metro East Studios in Gresham, Oregon, and it is the 21st day of February 2016. I have a guest you're going to enjoy, I guarantee that. Not a lot of horror stories, but a lot of energy. Mr. Lawrence Scott Gill. Scott, pleasure to have you today.
My pleasure
and,
being here.
As we start, I always like to get a little history on veterans, where you're from, where you went to school, what inspired you to go in the service?
I went to high school in Torrance, California, 2 years at North High, and then I graduated 2 years later at West High. It was a brand new school. And a year after I graduated, I was called in for a draft physical when I was 18, and they said that, go home and we don't need you now. And then a year later they called me and said, you got to go back and take another physical. And I was like, it's time. So I went and joined the Navy because my dad was in the Navy, and my one uncle and two uncles in the Army, one in the Air Force. But everybody in my family was in the military. No way I wouldn't go. In fact, I thought it was going to be a great adventure. It was quite an adventure, but didn't know what to expect. Like when you get your hair cut in boot camp and they say, how do you want it? And I just want a little bit off the side. And the guy goes, right. And so when I was in there, I knew that was coming because I've been to double pups and at Camp Pendleton, and they said, how do you want it? And I go, on the floor, on the deck. And the guy just looked at me and he goes, you been here before? I said, not here.
The funny stories are interesting, and as we go through life, we have a lot of veterans that have issues and have been involved in combat, and so we don't get involved in that to a great deal, but if it comes up, it's an issue we need to discuss. But I know from my experience, and you can probably attest to this, that we remember the good times, the funny stories, the fun times, and an experience in the service is absolutely priceless. And you came from a military family, so I'm guessing that, like you said, that you had an idea to go in the military. It was just in you. It was in the bloodstream. Now, Torrance is in California.
L.A.
And mid from L.A. south, which is basically Navy and Marine territory.
Right.
United States Navy. So you entered boot camp in what year?
September of '65.
September '65, and you went to Naval Training Center San Diego, which is no longer there. Is that correct?
Right, it's gone.
They moved it to the Great Lakes.
Yep.
So I have a picture of a young man here, L. Scott Gill. I'm going to hold up. If we can get a shot of this, and we all are familiar with what we look like now, and we forget what we looked like then. And this is a young man up close to me in the top row, third from the end. And as we look back, a lot of good memories are there. And if you notice, 27 October 1965. Great memories, and many years have gone by. So as we move along, tell me about your experience in boot camp when you thought everything's going to be wonderful. Like the haircut, by the way. And they're going to treat me like I'm a great human being. What changed the day you got to boot camp?
Well, nobody knows. They throw you on a bus and then you start marching everywhere. Whereas right now, there's no we're going to break you into anything. It's immediate, and you have to go through a basic battery test to decide what you're good at, what kind of job you're going to do in the Navy. Radio men, fire control, whatever you're going to do. They decide by how well you score on these exams. And everybody, there were like 5,000 of us in this giant hangar taking exams, and everybody takes like 5 exams, and when that's over, if you score high, you got to stay. Everybody who they don't want to go any further, they leave the building. And they stand out in the sun, and you're sitting there, oh, I got another test, and another test, and another test. And I get to the last test, and there's only 100 of us left out of 5,000. Well, because I had Latin in high school, the last one was a language exam, and they said, you're going to be an interpreter. And I go, okay, so whatever. I mean, I had no idea. And another kid said he was going to be an interpreter. So only 2 of us had to go to interpreter school. The only thing is, to go to take Russian, which I said I wanted to do Russian, they said, the school's 56 weeks long, and you have to extend for 2 years. And I said, what if I don't like it? And they said, tough. And I says, I don't think I want to do that. I think I'll take a different job. And they said, it ain't up to you. And every day they'd call me and make me run across the grinder, go talk to some chief recruiter and trying to tell me, you're going to extend. And I got a lot of harassment in boot camp because I didn't want to do it. And, you know, you have to, one of the things you have to do is swim because you're in the Navy.
Absolutely.
And they have this humongous Olympic pool in a building. And they said, okay, when we blow a whistle, each guy in the front row will dive in a lane and swim across the pool. Well, I shoot across the pool. And they said, get out of here, you know. And I go, well, guys would go out there and be floundering. And I'm going like, oh, you got to go back and try and swim the next day and the next day. And I go, you're kidding me. And the guy goes, yeah, it's great. He says, I know how to swim, but I get pulled out of classes and get to go play around in the pool. But some of them really couldn't swim. And then, in fact, a couple guys got washed out because they almost drowned. They had to pull them up with a hook and kept pulling them up and pulling them up. And they tried and tried, and I go, well, they're never going to learn how to swim. They're just stupid.
They're just stupid.
Well, they were. I go,
they call it drown proofing.
Yeah.
Drown proofing. In the Navy, they want you to know how to swim. In the Marine Corps, they didn't care if you were a so-called sinker, so there was a difference. So if you sank, no big deal.
You're on board ship. If it goes down, you better be able to swim.
You need to stay on the surface for a while until you get, if you don't have a life jacket, at least enough time to get your raft inflated if you happen to have one. Let me take not a break, we're not going to cut away, but I want to hold something up here in front of the camera because we have another movie star in our midst. As the years go by, I just wanted to show you a wonderful shot of a young man here. Can you see that? Yes. Isn't he good looking? Look at that. Looks like a movie star from the Jimmy Stewart period. So when was this taken, Lawrence?
Right, just as soon as I graduated basic, I went to downtown San Diego, and they got a studios. And
well, that looks good.
You know,
wow.
You know,
I love it. I love
what they call retouched. You know,
I love the stuff. They do the coloring and they do the lips and the little eyes and look something like from the 30s and 40s on the photographs.
My mom loved it. You know.
Well, of course, that's a mama's picture.
Yeah.
Now you got through boot camp, and it was how many weeks at that time?
Oh, geez, 16, I think. I can't remember.
So you graduated, and you were lucky enough to be assigned to, I would call it MOS, or military occupation.
Yeah, but I didn't. I had to go to A school to learn my trade, electrician's mate, and that's what they said I was going to be sent to, since I didn't want to be an interpreter. But school, because Vietnam was going hot and heavy, all the schools were filled. So they said, you're going to go to San Diego, and they didn't know what I was going to do. They said, you're going to 32nd Street. So I just went down around the bay, and I reported, and they put me in X Division, and they said, oh, you're going to service craft. And I go, what's that? You're going to be on tugs. So they put me on a YTM, yard tug middle class, and those are all World War II tugs, really bad shape. They were leaky and messy, and they had YTBs, yard tug bigs, and they were made in the 60s. They were brand new, and you could eat off the decks. They were so clean, they had linoleum floors, and I'm like, wow, look at these things. I went and visited a couple of them, and we used to ComShaw everything. you'd pull a ship in coming back from Nam, and then you'd, like, do you have any bread, any milk, any butter, and they would go, sure, because we're getting all new stores. So they'd have a working party bringing you stuff. Well, when milk was in 6-gallon cartons and had a plastic bag in it with a rubber nozzle, and we could only keep one. So they'd give me 3 of them. I'm going like, ah. So I'd run to the other tugs and say, hey, you got any meat? And they go, no. You got any ice cream? Yeah, we got ice cream. So they have extra, and we'd swap it back and forth. And we didn't ever I never ate on the base on 32nd Street. We because we got paid subsistence, so we had to go to the commissary, buy our own food and cook, and everybody took turns cooking, and some of them were terrible, so we wouldn't let them cook. They just poison you. And the craft master, he was a bouncer at night, first class bosun's mate. And somebody said, you got to wake him in the morning. And I went, and I started to go into his stateroom, and the guy said, don't touch him. And I go, what? And he goes, he knows karate. And I went, so? So I took a broom, and I went over and I touched him, and he went around and snapped the handle off in my hand. I went like, and he goes, oh, thanks. And I go, whoa. So when this other kid came from LA, was a draftee, I said, hey, you got to go wake the bosun mate. And I said, but don't go in the stateroom. I says, open the portal and then take a broom and tap him from outside there. And he did that, and his eyes got so big, everybody was laughing. It was funny. It was so funny. And then we got a deep fat fryer, and a 2-basket one, never had it. That thing never got cold for months. I mean, there was always making French fries and fried chicken, and when the potatoes would go bad before, we'd open there's a door on the back of the superstructure, and you'd open it, and seagulls would sit on the fantail, on the gunnel, and we would throw potatoes at them over and over again, and they'd all fly away. One day I took a potato and I threw it up in the air, and a seagull jumped up and it hit him in the chest, and he went flipping, he squawked, he flipped over in the water, and I was like, and everybody's like, you got him. We ran out, and I go, I can't believe, I wish I'd had a camera to get that picture, because it was unbelievable. I threw 1 million potatoes. No, this is the only time I ever hit a bird.
Let me bring up, you had mentioned
A school.
A school. And I have a picture here from A school. A school is what we've referenced earlier, and we'll put it right up there where you can see it. Electrician's mates, Class A. Bring back memories,
Oh,
Lawrence?
yeah.
How many years ago was that?
Oh, it was
Thank you.
66.
Thank you, 66. A lot of years have gone by. So you've now graduated, and you were assigned to what ship after graduation?
The Topeka.
Topeka, which you have on your ball cap, CLG-8.
Right.
And what is that designation for?
Guided Missile Light Cruiser. Read it backwards. Guided Missile
Light Cruiser. I'll be darned.
She was made in World War II. In fact, at the very end of the war, she went in, and then I think she was in service like 8 or 9 months, something like that, and then they mothballed her.
So when did you leave port, and where did you go on that ship?
Well, when I came aboard, she was at Hunters Point in San Francisco in the yards, and we were, they were redoing the gear, changing radar and everything, and then they, like I say, it was a World War II ship, so they were trying to modernize it, and USS Forrestal had a fire at sea.
Yes.
And, well, actually, a rocket came off of a jet. When they were at flight ops, they were all in, nobody was on board. It just took off, and it rammed the plane in front of it, and then these 500-pound bombs dropped into the fuel on the deck. And the first one went off and it made a hole, and then bombs started rolling into the ship. That was as it pitched. And I saw, when I was in the reserves, they showed a picture of the flight ops. They have a camera mounted in the island on a pedestal, and they show the assault team coming out to fight the fire, and they're foaming everything. And then there's a backup team with what they call an atomizer, which makes this real fine mist to protect you from the heat. And they got the fire out, and this chief just says, start washing the foam off. But the fire had been burning for so long that as soon as they wiped the foam off, it reignited. And one of the bombs went off, and the camera shakes, and then you see the hoses are laying on the deck, and they're all gone. The rest, both teams are gone, blew them overboard.
It's amazing that even in a friendly port, with the aircraft carrier, aircraft and armed munitions, the hazards that one works with every day, and from what I've seen, you can probably attest to this, that the fire training is tremendous.
Oh yeah.
What those folks go through on the fire teams in the Navy on ships is tremendous. What heroes, those unheralded heroes in all aspects of the military, each MOS, highly trained, and I think that's a part of it that many people, unless they've been in the military, don't see.
They don't understand.
They do not understand the training and what knowledge you acquire in the service that you surely wouldn't get just going to college. I mean, it's only in the military. If you haven't been there, you can't even discuss it. So when did you leave San Francisco, and where did you go?
Well, we came out of dry dock to let the Forrestal into our dry dock, and then a few days later we went to shakedown cruise for 3 days, and then they came back and they worked for a couple more weeks, and then we went to San Diego for refresher training. And then since I had graduated from school, I was kind of a know-it-all, and I was number 2 in four classes, and because the number 1 student was a college graduate in electrical engineering, and he helped me. So I when I had a question, I'd say, like, I don't get this, and then he would explain stuff to me, and we aced everything. So then I graduated with a 96.06 average.
Boy.
And but when I came aboard ship, I kind of ticked off my first class, and we had a senior chief in charge, but he's a senior chief. He was never around hardly, except at quarters. And this guy in Finkbinder, he got mad at me because we were doing drills, and this master chief electrician mate running doing the testing. We were moored in San Diego in the harbor in the center of a lane, and that's fore and aft. You're tied to a buoy, and they ran drill after drill, and nobody could pass a basic, fire in the generator, high water in the boiler, low water in the boiler. What would you do? What you're supposed to do? And they kept flunking everybody, and I'm going like, whoa, I'm just watching. I'm nobody. And this master chief says, Jesus Christ, he says, you guys are all second-class electricians and you can't even stand a basic watch? And I'm going like, I could do it. And he goes, what? And Finkbinder goes, no, he's a mess cook. He don't know what he's talking about. He can't do nothing. And he looked at me and he goes, think you can do this? And I went, sure. And he says, okay, go over here and put the first generator online, because you're moored, they can shut off all the power, and they do. There's a switchboard on the forward end of the ship, and I was in the after switchboard, and so you can actually run the whole ship from either one, but the power's split up unless you take a hit or something. Then you can reroute it around and get it on from either or other. So the switchboard's behind you, and there's a control bench that's 3-sided like a bay window, and the meters are mounted here and at an angle over here, and then there's a table. And I had never, ever touched anything. I did all the theory in school, but I didn't have any experience. And the chief says, okay, put the first generator on the line. Well, when I went to close this remote trip breaker, I had never felt it. And when I raised it, I didn't latch it, and I let go, and the lights came on, and then the lights went out. And he goes, and he says, don't get excited. He says, you really got to ram that handle to get it to catch. And so I did it, and the lights came on, and he goes, great. And he says, now parallel the generators. And I go, sure. Well, there's a scope called a synchronoscope, and it's just got this needle that's turning around. And when you first turn it on, it's spinning real fast. And you slow it down so that it's moving, and just 5 minutes to 12, you parallel it, because by the time you latch the breaker, it remotely clicks in, and they're in phase. They're both they're running, the sine waves are in a line, and
so they're synced.
In sync, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, when I went the second one, I did the same thing. It dropped back, and without any thought, I grabbed it and I hit it hard, and it was 180 out by then, and all the lights on the ship are going blue, 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 just blinking away, and I swore it looked like the generator lifted up off the deck. And I went over and I tripped the generator finally, and the chief goes, he says, just calm down. He says, you're getting excited. He said, so finally I did that, and then I did high water, low water in the boiler, and then he says, they're firing the generator. Well, you're supposed to run behind the switchboard, and there's 3 480-volt knife switches, big ones with ears on them, and you take a dowel off the bulkhead and slide it through the ears, and then you grab it and pull all 3 of them open at the same time. Well, I walked behind it, and nobody followed me, and they're all waiting, and they're going like, what's he doing? And I took the dowel and I shot it through the ears, because this is 480-volt live, and they're about that far apart. And you put your hands in here. I jump up in the air, and I hear, no! And I jerk it open, and all the lights are out. And then he goes, simulate! And I went, oh! And I slam it shut, and then he goes, don't really do it, because if I had got electrocuted, it would have been their problem. They'd have to explain it. So then I pulled the dowel out and put it back. And he told my first class, he says, this man should be standing watches, not those idiots. And well, after that, I'm mess cooking. I did 6 months on the mess decks. First thing, he put me in first class mess. So they have one mess cook working in their mess, getting them breakfast cereal and whatever, and where's my Fruit Loops? Where's my sugar pops? And I got so sick of these guys whining. And when you run out of cereal anyways, and everybody wants the sweet cereal, and when it's gone, they're like, they're crying about it. So I finally one day I just went up to the mess deck master at arms. I says, I'm out of here. I says, you put some other idiot in there. I don't care. I'm not doing that. So they have me taking a toothbrush and scrubbing the bulkhead into the deck in the corner, and I'm sitting there throwing water and soap and scrubbing it with a toothbrush for weeks. And then as I'm coming up on my 6 months, my division officer, who was a warrant, a W-4, he goes, you're going to do it another 6 months. And I went, what? And because we had reservists that had never been to school, and when you go to school, you're called designated. You have to be an electrician if you went to school. They're not going to let you say, I'm going to be a signalman now, because you're trained. They've already spent money on you. Well, a reservist, they sit there and they put a reservist in, and if they haven't been to school, they don't have any training. They have nothing. It's all OJT, on-the-job training for whatever they're going to do. And we had a bunch of reservists, and I said, I don't think so. And the warrant goes, what did you say? And I says, I'm not doing it for another 6 months. So I ran up to the chaplain, Roman Catholic priest, and he goes, I says, I'm designated, and I'm being picked on, and I says, I think you ought to do something about it. He went down there and just jumped all over the warrant. Well, but it didn't make me ingratiated to anybody after that. I mean, the chief picked on me, Finkbinder picked on me, the warrant officer picked on me, And any kind of crappy job they'd give me, they'd put me in after steering for a sea duty detail. And I was qualified to stand watches, but they put me in after steering. Well, in after steering, there's a quartermaster with a headset, and there's a machinist mate, and an electrician. And when you lose steering, you have to close and open valves for the hydraulics, and then you got to take this handle and put it on a shaft. And on a cruiser, the rudder's huge. It's really heavy and it's hard to turn, and it takes hundreds. You sit there and cranking, both of you busting your gut, and you cannot have a little guy doing it. He couldn't even do it. And depending on where the rudder is, if the rudder's amidships, you got to go 5 degrees right, 5 degrees left, and then back into midships. If it's way out, then you only have to go 5 degrees to the other side and then bring it back. Well,
let me summarize now. You were considered as an interpreter because you had Latin. You were going to study Russian, which didn't occur.
No.
And then you ended up as an electrician's mate.
Right.
And you learn on the job.
Right.
Learning what to do by learning what not to do.
Well,
but it's educational.
Yeah.
And then you end up mess cook.
Yeah.
And not a bad job, by the way. Right? Right? And the Navy eats good.
Oh, no, not that part. It's just that, you did a lot of swabbing and working in a scullery.
That's right. So so you ended up in Vietnam or off the coast of Vietnam at some point. Was it on the same ship?
Oh, no. No, I got sent into U.S. Naval Support Activity Da Nang, this thing
right here. Yes, sir.
Yes. Anyhow, I got sent there, and I was a second class by then. I'd made third on board ship, and then I made second, and then, it wasn't very long. 4 or 5 months later, I got orders to Vietnam, and I went to Da Nang, and they didn't know what to do with me. A friend of mine from my ship, another second class EM, we went to San Diego together and went through training together. But he got sent to Saigon, and he was on PCF Swift boats.
Oh, yeah.
With the twin 50s and the electric twin 50 on it. And he did that, and I asked him, I saw him years later, and we talked, and I said, did you have any trouble? And he said, nah. He says, some of them got, a lot of them had bad times, but he says, they were always, pretty lucky. And I says, I thought that's what I was going to do. They were going to send me down on a river patrol, and they ended up putting me on surface craft. Because I had tugs in San Diego, they go, well, you got prior experience. So, boom, they put me on tugs in Da Nang, which I thought it was okay. The tug I was on was older than any tug I'd ever seen. It was made during World War II, and we didn't have a battery charger, so you couldn't shut down. When you shut down the main engine, a big diesel, they had a little tiny diesel that you had to run all the time. But when they wanted to work on that, you'd either have to have the main engine running, or because there's no way to charge the batteries. So I came up with a big a plank of wood, and put these big mogul base sockets on a board, 10 of them, and an amp meter, and then I made them series parallel, and then I hooked them to the batteries at the in and out of the battery tray, and then you just screw a bulb in, and as the current from one bulb, it would read on an amp meter, and then I'd screw another one and another one. But because the tug was so old, you couldn't stop light out, and at night you could have no white lights on at night, and I tried charging at night, and everybody'd be yelling, "Who's got that light on?" And it would leak out of portholes and stuff, and you could see us. So I only charged in the daytime. I charged all day long, and then if you go too fast, you can boil the acid. So you turn them in, and as the current goes up, you start cooking the batteries, and you have to have a thermometer, and you check the temperature, and then you just unscrew a couple bulbs and let it slow it down, so you like a trickle charger, and make it charge during the day without ruining them. and we're supposed to have 120 volts worth of batteries. And when I came aboard, we had 96 volts, and I'm like, and it was really fun starting it every day because it should have been 120. And one day I was sleeping, and every morning the engineman would shut these valves, open these valves on the main engine, and then run the generator as a motor, and it would turn the engine over and blow out all the soot and stuff out of the cylinders. And I'm like, and you could hear, and I go, yeah, that's cool. And then I'd go back to sleep, and then all of a sudden I hear somebody pounding on my stateroom. I was made chief engineer because the second class engineman got sent home, and I was the ranking snipe. So anyways, I got my own stateroom, and I hear this noise, and I'm like, what the heck is that thing still being blown down for? Because you only do it for like a minute. And I'm like, oh shit. I put my shower shoes on, skivvies and t-shirt. I go running across the catwalk, run down there, and the battery caps are popping out of the batteries. And I'm like, oh my God. And I run down the ladder, and I hit the trip button, and the guy, he said, we already tried that. And I go, so I opened it up, and I took a pair of dikes, and I cut the M coil, which is holding the contactor shut, I thought. I cut it, and it's still welded shut, and I'm like, oh God. So then I grabbed a great big screwdriver and stuck it in between. It's DC, direct current, and I stuck it in, and I said, turn your heads, man. And I pulled on it, and it threw an arc about 3 feet out in the air before it broke. You know, it tried to keep the thing, but it ruined all my contacts, were all melted, and the lead straps on the batteries puddled from the heat. And I'm like, oh man, I go up and I go, this is a 369, we're down. And I throw it, and I said, you know, wake me.
So you were in country. You were actually
yeah,
in country,
yeah.
but you were aboard ship.
A tug.
Now, where were you moored?
At Deepwater Piers.
In
Da Nang.
In Da Nang.
In
So,
Da Nang,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And then later, normally, the only thing that ever happened dangerous, one of the kids got washed overboard during a hurricane, during the monsoon. The weather was real bad, and they had to help move a ship to a sea buoy to help it because it was broke loose, and they were pushing it back into place, and it was a YTB too. And you know, they got more power and everything. Well, this kid they called Sweet Pea, he went out on deck because some of the lines started washing over the side, and they'd foul the screw. So, which he would normally not even be allowed out there, but he thought he was going to be a hero. Well, a big old wave came and blew him overside, and so they yelled for help, and we had the duty. Our bosun mate, said, cast off, we're going. And we started racing out to the mouth of the harbor. And the waves were, 30 feet high. They go way over us. And as we'd have to face into the wave, and a wave would come up, and then you would go right through it. It was so big, you just cutting through the wave and then drop down the next side. And in over an hour, we chased this kid, and he just kept going further and further out in the ocean. First we saw him pretty close, and then he was like 100 yards, and the bosun mate was saying, give me everything you got, and I have a rheostat that controls the speed of the boat. It's diesel electric, and I crank it up and it'd trip, and so then I crank it down, reset it, and then turn it on and raise it, and then I said I can't go any higher because it'll keep tripping, So
a shipmate gets washed overboard, and he's not prepared with a life jacket.
He had a jacket.
Oh.
He had a Mae West.
Lucky, huh?
No, he inflated it, but he was riding waves. He was inside the wave as it was coming in, and then would pop up the backside, and then he was trying to swim, and he drug him out to sea. They never found his body. They never.
You did lose him.
He didn't ever recover him. He was never seen. And then we got orders there was a rock barge that a fleet tug was hauling up north to Dong Ha and for the base, and it broke loose from the fleet tug in this storm. well, this was when the weather's nice and clear and everything, and so they tell us that this YTB, and I was on a YTM again, and we had to go up and help. We're going to drag it back into the water. Well, when we get there, they were just flying one of those earth graders with the blade, and they were lifting it off the top. They had pushed all the rock off onto the ground on either side. And then we had a pusher boat, a PCF, a swift boat, a Huey Cobra, and they had Puff in the air, you know, the twin-hull jobber with the minigun.
Very familiar with Puff.
And 8 Marines were on the beach taking a shower in a creek that was dropping into this bay we were in. And they're sitting there taking their shirts off, and they're taking a GI shower there, and I'm like, they made a bridle to go across the H-bits, and then they make a big eye splice, and they slide it through the bridle and hook it on, and then we had 1,800 yards of 7-inch nylon. That's the circumference, and it's white as snow. It's brand new, never been touched by anybody, and we had it all flaked out on our tug, and we took the eye splice and gave it to the crew on the pusher boat, and they took it up onto the beach and hooked it onto the barge. Then we took the part of it and started laying it out to go back to this YTB, because their draft is so much more than ours. We can get closer to shore than they can. So they tie on, and then we figure eight it on a H-bit, it's called. It's like this and cross that way, and it's that big around. You can pull aircraft carriers with them. And we're backing down, and the rope is starting to come up out of the water, and as it's rising, and it isn't even out of the water, and it goes, and it parts. And I go, but about over half of the barge was on land, and so it still weighs tons, you know, and I'm like.
You had to take the barge. Where was the barge supposed to go to? Actually into Dong Ha?
Yeah.
So they were going to take
it. They would give it back to a fleet tug. I don't know where because it would be empty by then. They'd probably take it back to Da Nang or wherever and load it with rock again, start it all over. But, you know, they were hauling it in a storm. They shouldn't have. I think they kind of missed the boat on that one, but.
Because there is river access up there.
Oh, yeah.
To Dong Ha.
Yeah.
And the Cam Lo area. And let me pull up another picture here, and I want you to elaborate briefly on this. And we have Lawrence S. Gill.
Yeah.
And this is, we're going to camera 3. And this is
my ship.
Commensurate with the cap you are wearing. That's the ship right there, USS Topeka.
Right. Originally, the ship was CL-67. It was not a guided missile. In 1960, they took her out of dry dock and they cut the ass end of the ship off. They had 6-inch guns and 2 turrets, like on the front here. These 2.
Yes.
Okay, there were 2 more on the aft end of the ship, and they cut those off, and they removed all kinds of stuff, and then there's a missile house back here, which you can't see, and it's really armored. The walls are at least 6 inches thick or more, and then there's 2 hydraulic doors that are that thick, at least a foot thick, and they're on hydraulics, and when they open them to take a missile, they bring missiles out from the missile house and load them on an arm brings them out and puts them on the launcher. They're Terrier missiles, and they bring one on either side, and those doors go boom, boom, and you're like, holy shit. I mean, they're so fast you could blink, and they'd flip them open and close, and they were working on, the missile men were working, and they have an elevator that brings a warhead up from a storage room and forward. It comes down underneath, and then it brings them up an elevator, and then they have to mount the warhead to the rocket, and then they bring it out because you can shoot it at ship to ship, ship to shore, ship to air. So you have to have different ordnance on it. And so it's not, the motors are all ready to go, but none of the warheads are on them. You have to decide. And we carried nukes. And one of our guys was working on this elevator, and it has a drum switch. It's it's an up and down. It's all of this is just a lever. Well, he's supposed to turn off the power and tag it when he's working on it. And he was in a big hurry, and he didn't do it. And he stuck his head and arm inside this elevator, and then he brought his leg up with his knee, and he hit that drum switch, and the thing goes, boom, and it killed him instantly. And so that was one fatality we had. And then as we were going into the Mediterranean out of the Atlantic, one of the guys disappeared. And we had quarters every morning, and he's not there. So then they do a man overboard drill, and everybody has to go to a man overboard station, and then they take a head count, and where's so-and-so? And he's not here. Then they search the ship, and then for 3 days we did circles looking for him. And after 3 days they said, well, he's drowned by now. So
that's why we do this show. If I can share a couple of thoughts, there's so many support groups in what you just discussed, and all the things you do in support of the combat units. Not that you weren't in combat. Anytime you're near it, you're in the zone, you're subjected to it. The importance that we have to place on the support groups like you were in. And I think the naval ships are just majestic. That picture is majestic. But to have lost, at this point in the story, 3 people that you were stationed with, you think about it. You never forget.
No.
Those people are never mentioned until now.
Oh, yeah.
Until right now. How many that we have lost in those accidents?
I can't remember anybody's
storms. You can remember faces.
Yeah.
But how many people that whomever sees an interview like this, that at least those young men got some brief recognition that nobody ever heard of except their families and a few people they were aboard ship with, and the difficulties and those dangerous jobs. There are many in just what you've described. So you left Vietnam at what point?
In 25th of June, 69.
Wow. And you went where? What base did you go to?
I went to Long Beach. I flew to Norton Air Force Base, is where everybody, is in the Navy and the Marine Corps. They flew us out of there. The Air Force comes out of different places.
So you were active how long?
3 years, 10 months.
3 years, 10 months. Was it an early out?
Yeah.
At the 10 months early out. They were doing a lot of that during the Vietnam era. And you then were discharged from active duty.
In Long Beach.
At Long Beach. And,
got no travel because I only lived 13 miles away. You have to be like 100 miles from where what do they call that? Your home point of origin or whatever. Anyways, if you're 100 miles from where you're released, you get paid some travel pay. And the guys made money is if you were on the East Coast and you were getting your homes on the West Coast, you got paid all the way across. But I was 13 miles away. I got zip. Didn't give me anything.
They're cheap, aren't they?
Yeah, well, no, I don't. I was glad to get out there.
Just glad to go.
Yeah.
So, and you got out at what rank?
Second class.
Second class.
E5.
E5. Tell me something about, very quickly, something about the patches. E6 you have here?
And you take one of those away.
Yes.
That I earned in the reserves.
And we have a patch for the USS Topeka.
And that one's a peak. I got some on the other side. This was the ship I had in the reserves, the Perkins, and I was, when I was in Greece, I got TAD, temporarily assigned duty, to the USS Saratoga, an aircraft carrier, to learn motor rewind. We only had one. We had 2 motor rewinders, and one guy got separated and got sent home from the Med. He got flown back to the States. And we had a second class, and I was a third then. And they said, we need another motor rewinder. Who wants to do it? Yeah, I'll do it. So they sent me, I didn't know I was going to the Sarah. They sent me to the Sarah, and when they got there, this chief goes, well, we're going to teach you all there is to know about motors. And they had a lye tank, a great big, huge, like a swimming pool, about 3 feet high, 4 feet high. And they would take all these take the stators apart, pull the rotors out, take the end bells off, and they would set them in these lye tank, and there'd be hundreds of motors in there. Then they would turn on and start pumping water in, and then they would take cases of lye and took a welding hammer, a chipping hammer, and poked holes in the lids of all those cans of lye, and threw the cardboard box, the cans, and their aluminum cans, and throw them into the lye tank, into this tank. And the next day, the cardboard's gone, the tubes there lies in is gone, there's nothing. And then you pick the motors up and rinse them off with fresh water, and then you can, before you put them in, you cut the end bell of the winding off one side, the end bell side with the connections, because you have to know how many wires are in hand and the sizes. And you put the stator in there, and then you take a screwdriver on the opposite side, and then you pull, because all the strings have rotted, and you just take and pull on them, and you start pulling these wires out of the inside of the laminations. They slide out, and you might have to wire brush them and clean them up. But I did 2 weeks on the Sarah anyways, and then my ship had left Athens. Piraeus, Greece, that's the harbor. It's down the hill. Athens like 10 miles uphill from there. And I thought, like, man, where am I? My ship's gone. They don't tell you nothing. So I'm like, I'm wondering what's going on. And we had been to Malta before, and we went back to Malta, and the Sarah's a carrier, so she can't go inside the harbor. It's too big. But my ship would fit inside the harbor. In fact, I got pictures of her sitting in Valletta, the capital. And then I got orders back. They transferred me back to my ship, and I got off, and there was a bar on the head of the ship, and we had Marines on board. We had 8 Marines, first lieutenant, I think, or second lieutenant, I don't remember, and a sergeant. And I went into this bar, and this idiot bosun mate from my ship sees me and yells, and there were like 50 limey sailors in this bar. And I went, and this guy liked to fight. He start fights everywhere, and I go, look, don't cause no trouble. And he goes, no, I'm here just to have a beer. And I go, yeah, I know you. So we go up to the bar, and this guy goes, hey, mate, let me buy you a beer. And he gets a beer, and he hands it to him, and he goes, F the Queen, and dumps the beer on the
we
bar.
won't elaborate on that, but it's interesting. You mentioned, made a reference to the what I would call the stern, the aft part of the ship. You had a term for it. The A end, and limeys, of course, are the British.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
No,
that's
yeah,
okay.
well,
I'm just getting the clarification. It's not bad. It's not a bad thing.
No, yeah.
But those things that we do in the service that are natural to us,
I don't. Yeah.
we don't deal with this PC stuff, do we?
No.
We don't deal with it.
I hate that.
Because you can't do away with a part of your life. That's a part of your life. So God bless you, and we have a lot of pictures here, as many of the vets do. We just don't have time to show all of them. But my gosh, what a history! And like I say, the funny times, the fun times. You lived in California how long when you got out of the Navy? Before you came to Oregon?
Well, I went from L.A. I moved up to the Bay Area, Livermore, California, and then I stayed there. That's where I went back in the reserves. I decided to go in. I was at Treasure Island and a destroyer there, and I went to firefighting school 4 times and damage control school 4 times. They call it Buttercup. It's a tin can in a swimming pool, and they try to sink it, and you're supposed to keep it afloat. and hardly anybody ever keeps it afloat because it's rigged against you. And
Couple of quick questions. What did you do for a career when you got out of the Navy?
I started my first thing I did was worked for a motor rewind shop because that's what I knew. And then,
Gee, look at all the electrical training. Look how that.
well, I was an electrician
You can
eventually.
transition. See.
Yeah, and then I went to, when that shop got bought and I got laid off, I went to work for Westinghouse rewinding motors downtown on the
Yes.
on the what is that, the east side of the river. And I worked at Westinghouse for a while, and then I applied for apprenticeship school for electrician, what they call inside wiremen, electricians, not a mate, electricians, and but you had to be a resident. You know, you can't, in Oregon, you can't get any apprenticeship unless you've been here at least 6 months. So I did my 6 months at Westinghouse, and then they said, sure, we'll take you. And then I went to I went to electrician's mate school, and when I went, it was only 4 years apprenticeship. Now it's 5, and they gave me no credit for my military service or nothing. They made me go through the whole thing.
Isn't that interesting?
From the day one, it was like, and when I talked to the school coordinator, I said, hey, they took 36 of us, I think. I said, was I number 1? And he goes, no. And I go, what was your number 1 pick? And he goes, some 18-year-old kid. And I went, he didn't have any experience, any knowledge about it. And I go, geez, I can't believe that. You know, the things you don't, and a lot of stuff you learn, in theory you learn all kinds of stuff, but a lot of it you don't get to apply it. You know, like some of the stuff they teach you is for the linemen worry about, like hysteresis and, what do they call that? Jeez, I'm getting so old. Anyways.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. No, it just, we get to, one thing about apprenticeship school, we get to go to the Dalles and go to Celilo, where they have the 800,000 volt DC line that goes to Phoenix and to LA.
Mm-hmm.
And they take you on a tour in that, and you see the insulators going through the side of the building, and they got cables into these insulators that are bigger than houses. And I'm going like, because it's 800,000 volts, and I'm like, the weight.
Priceless experiences.
I think our time's up, almost 5 minutes. Anyways, when you were saying, I go back to when we were moving that rock barge, we got shot at. And I was sitting on the port side, standing in the aft end of the tug, and I saw these pops in the water, and I'm like, what the hell is that? And then I saw another one, and it kept getting closer and closer. And then I looked up on this hill, and you could see puffs of smoke.
Well, you were under fire.
Yeah, and I go, we're getting shot at. I says, everybody get down. So this kid stands there, and finally they're zoning in on him, and they hit the bulkhead on one side of him, and they hit the bulkhead on the other side of him, and he went down, and I went, oh my God, they shot him. And I'm crawling, and there's all this nylon line flaked out on the deck, so the gunwale is, about this high, but there's about that much line up to the edge of the gunwale, and I crawl over to him, and I roll him over, and I rip his shirt off, and I'm like, there's no wound, and I'm like, and he fainted. I grabbed him, I was gonna choke him to death. I go, you son, and then I ducked down, and my butt's in the air, and we're still taking fire, but then this PCF noticed us hitting us. They were between us and the shore, and they started opening with a twin 50, and then all of a sudden the Marines disappeared into the jungle. There was only 8 of them. They disappeared and they were gone. And then this Huey Cobra just went along and just saturated the whole side of this mountain with 2,000 rounds a minute of cannon fire, and just all you see is dirt and dust and everything. And then when they stopped, I said, it was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I mean,
well, we must bless the pilots and the Cobra pilots. And as I stated earlier, the untold stories, the fun stories, the fun times are really great memories. And Lawrence, it's been an absolute pleasure.
You bet.
And we're going to sign off for now.
Okay.
And thank you for joining us. And until next time, have a safe journey wherever life leads. Thank you.